Hi and good evening, everyone. My name is Albert, and this is Vlogs About Nothing. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your night to join me. I really appreciate it. It sounds like my voice is slowly but surely recovering. So, welcome to my channel. We talk about nothing here, and tonight I want to talk more about the history of Central Park. Link in the description below to some really cool videos that discuss this. Again, I always say in way better ways than I could ever possibly begin to. So I definitely always recommend and encourage all of you that watch to check out these links because they're good stuff. You feel me? A lot of stuff that I think of extemporaneously comes and is influenced from a lot of the stuff that obviously I consume. And, I consume a lot of content and I go out of my way to try and find different things that are, based in historical fact and obviously things that are based in just opinion. But I always try and find things on both sides of an argument and then sort of come to my own conclusion as to what I think about that particular scenario. And in this case, the history of Central Park is super, super interesting. And in fact, again, I encourage anyone and everyone that's watching this video to not just look in the link in the description below that I have to offer you, but also on your own accord and in your own time, like just spend a few minutes learning about the history of Central Park because again, New York City, is one of the top 10 destinations in the entire world currently. And I'm a huge fan of New York City. I've been to New York City a few times. I stayed in Manhattan, West 57th and Ninth, West 57th Street and Ninth Avenue. If you're not familiar with how East Coast people give, the directions of where they're from or whatever. But I've been in all boroughs. I've spent extensive time in Brooklyn, just as well as I have Manhattan. And let me tell you, I've been to Battery Park, I've been to Central Park, the two parks that are on the island, and I really, just like the 700,000 people that call that roughly 9 mile area in lower Manhattan home have really good memories of. I've never ever had an issue with being in New York City. And again, that's coming from high northern desert boys perspective of a really small town kind of purview as it because it concerns going up to New York City, right, up to the boroughs and stuff. But like the history of Central Park, and I've had I had such a wonderful privilege being in Manhattan and staying in Lower Manhattan that the proximity to all of these locations is like just absolutely cherry. You feel me? Like it is just a wonderful, awesome place, and because it's an integrated society. You feel me? I mean, haven't you noticed that every place that's cool in the world is a place that is accepting of everyone? And typically speaking, they are places that are a mecca of social and cultural integrated societies that's the biggest selling point, right? Like that's why people want to move there. That's why young people want to like go and work in these areas because of the other people. And I think that it's something that's lost in modern storytelling, even is just the impact that other people have on our decision making and how it's always not just profit oriented. You feel me? Like to the working, normal class, everyday person like you or me, you don't get any benefit from living around millions of other people in any sort of net direct way other than typically speaking your living conditions should all be that much better because of the sheer density and population and all of the opportunity that population density can provide to all of its neighbors and so forth. I mean, it's quite a remarkable thing, honestly, the way big cities work. And the history of Central Park is unfortunately rooted in what I would argue what this country has suffered from since its inception, and that's the the philosophical and ideological split in the way that we continue to systematically promote a kind of systemic racist agenda, that it really does end up doing a lot more harm than it does good. I mean, and obviously that's how it would work, right? But obviously it's something that, again, like in New York City and in Central Park. So, if you didn't already know, Seneca Village was a place in northern New York City, and just above where Lower Manhattan is now. And it was a place where there was cultural integration. It was a place where, if you look back at his archived property records and so forth, I guess before even the Civil War happened, right? That one of the stipulations to voting or to obtain suffrage was the idea that you had to own land. And so, even in states that weren't historically perceived to be pro slavery, like in the northern region of the United States, New York State being that biggest example, in New York City, there had already been archived data from almost nearly a century of there being successful racial integration before there had even been a debate as to whether or not slavery would still be a thing. I mean, don't you think that's kind of weird that like ancestors debated like whether or not it was going to be okay to allow other people to like do stuff? Isn't that weird? Don't you? I think that's weird. I think that I couldn't ever imagine having a conversation and being, in any way kind of like bigotry related, in that, it's like, okay, we're coming up with public policy here. Let's figure out how to move all the black people. Like, is this a conversation that happens? Like, do white people, and I'm not, part of me is joking and a part of me is dead serious. You feel me? Like, how does systemic racism take place? Like, is it vocalized, or is it just like subtle and weird? And I mean, I feel like it can be a little bit of both, right? I feel like when our history teachers don't tell us that places like Seneca Village were like a thing, you feel me? And that long before some arbitrary doctrine said and had to make it official that you couldn't make other people your slaves, there were people that had way evolved past that concept and were living lives, peaceful lives, that were interrupted by Uncle Sam and his sad sort of reflection at the time and of the time, that made it so that like all of the black people had to move and all of the racially integrated people had to move to make way for a public park that historically is already just in an area that benefits the ultra wealthy. I mean, again, I open this video saying that I love Manhattan, and I do, but it's also one of the places in the world that demonstrates to you in straight, like direct, in your eyes, the inequality that is also akin to these kinds of places, unfortunately, because you'd feel like in that circumstance, more people would benefit from large open public spaces. But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't. Is that Central Park does not do any of those things. Not as effective as it would be if there were like a bunch of smaller parks dispersed throughout the city and so forth, right? Like, so again, Central Park has a really interesting story behind it, but I think if I could have people take something away from watching this particular vlog about nothing, it would be that, with a grain of salt, understand that America is a good place. It's a great country. There's a lot of stuff that happens here that is good. Just good vibe. But, like, we can't change history, and we can't make it more convenient to people that don't, or we don't think will be able to understand the fact that people have come like a little bit, at least since then. And if we are like taught real accurate history, that would be in our best interest so that we could, really like learn about things like critical race theory without white people jumping on a bandwagon and saying that critical race theory is anti-white, when in fact we live in a world that is anti everything but white. You feel me? And like, I'm not just saying that. This is proven time and time again, not just here in America, but in places all over the world. And that's a little sus. It's a little weird, I think. You know? I mean, large public service projects that are directed to benefit the larger community as a whole should benefit the larger community as a whole and not just a certain segment of the population that with or without your help is going to be just fine. You know, like they'll be just fine. So I hope that you guys have a really good night. Thanks for watching my show, and we'll see you really soon. Bye.